All right. Good morning, everybody. I am going to go over the RPA, which is the Residential Purchase Agreement. And this is the offer on a listing from your client. So what I was saying before before Colette joined was before sending in an offer, I always call the listing agent. As a listing agent, it's very nice to be able to talk to the buyer's agent that is making an offer on the property prior to actually seeing it. If we don't call and don't find out what the seller needs, we kind of go back and forth with the counter offers, and that's not something that you need to do. So less paperwork, less time, and easier on the agents and the buyers and the sellers. So things I like to find out are where the seller's at. Does the seller need a lease back, which means they stay in the property after close of escrow? Is the seller flexible on closing costs? Are they open to giving some closing costs to my clients? We look at how long the home has been on the market. And all of these factors put together will help you formulate the best offer for your buyer. So talking to the listing agent, building rapport, letting them know that you are an agent that is diligent about their work and goes the extra mile to stand out is going to help you get a ton of offers accepted over other agents who just some agents will just send an offer, not even call or text. Don't be that agent. Be the agent that actually stands out, talks to the listing agent, and you will find that you will get way more offers accepted than if you don't do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of different offers that I have sent for my clients. Let me just share my screen here. All right, so we're going to look at a couple different things. The first page of the RPA. So the first one I'm going to show you is a conventional loan. Let's see. All right, here, this is the residential purchase agreement. So this is my client, Chris Stacy. We closed last month. Up here, residential purchase agreement, we call it an RPA for short. You put the date. Here's where the buyer goes, and it says buyer right here. Then you list the address that they are making an offer on and what city and in what county. Then you put the zip code and the APN. Now, you guys, the assistants do all of this for you. And since we do use, what's it called? Authentisign, it pulls all of this data automatically from the MLS and just puts it in here. So it's super easy. The MLS and the National Association of Realtors do provide this service for you. And if you do choose to use DocuSign, you will have to go and find all of this information on your own. So here, this is where we start the actual offer. If your client is not intending to occupy the property, or if it is going to be an investment property, you want to check does not intend to occupy the property. Versus a buyer who does intend to occupy it, will go right here. So the first line is going to be what the EMD is going to be. Now, if you're looking on, who's not muted? Oh, here we go, mute. All right. If you're looking on the MLS, you will see that this seller does suggest an EMD. Now, I say suggest because it's not set in stone. You don't have to put what the seller wants as an EMD on your offer. You can make it whatever you want. So before the pandemic, I had a client that had almost zero money, and I was putting in offers that had $1,000 earnest money deposit EMD. Usually this is 1% of the purchase price. But you can make it whatever you want. If you want your offer to stand out, you can put a larger EMD. So you can put $10,000 as an earnest money deposit. Now this money will be applied to their closing costs at close of escrow. So if their closing costs were $10,000 and they put an EMD of $5,000, this would be applied to their closing costs, and they don't have to come out of pocket that money anymore. So this is where the EMD goes. I like to put 3 business days just to give my buyer some time to get that in there and get it wired over. We got to deal with weekends and stuff like that. Now, here's a trick for a seller. If you have a seller under contract and the buyer has missed their window of putting the earnest money deposit in, say it's day 4 and the EMD still isn't there. Now, if you want to play hardball as a listing agent and say you got an offer that your seller wasn't super happy with, but they got another offer and they're already under contract, and then you get another full price offer, no closing costs, and your seller's like, oh my God, I wish I could take that offer. What do you guys think is a way out with the earnest money deposit loophole? If the buyer on your listing does not deposit that money within 3 business days, does anyone know what you can do for your seller to take that other offer? You can actually cancel the deal. And the reason for this is because the buyer did not perform according to contract. So that has happened to me before, especially during the pandemic. So additional deposit, I can tell you I've never used this line. It can be placed into escrow on or before date. The additional deposit will be considered part of the MD or will not be considered part of the EMD. So additional deposit could be like, okay, once we get past the inspection period, we're going to put an additional deposit down, or stuff like that. So line C, this agreement is contingent upon buyer qualifying for a new loan, and you want to check one of these boxes. So this buyer is using a conventional loan. If you were FHA, you check the next one, VA, check the next one, or other. So other would be like hard money loan or some other type of loan. So be careful when you're looking at this, guys, checking the box. Some people check this for conventional. Obviously the boxes are kind of different there. So how do we get this number? This number is what the actual loan is going to be. So it's going to be this number minus the EMD minus the balance of purchase price, which is the down payment, will be what the loan is going to be for. All right, so if you use line D, this agreement is contingent upon buyer qualifying to assume the following existing loans. This means when you're making an offer on a home that has an assumable loan. So this is going to happen a lot in the future, you guys, because we have a lot of what? Very, very low interest rate loans out there these days because of what happened in the pandemic. So you will be seeing more and more of this. If you're making an offer that your client is going to be assuming the loan, you will use this line. And this has to be coordinated with the lender and everything. And the buyer will have to go ahead and qualify for that loan with that bank also. The next one is going to be seller financing. So buyer to execute a promissory note is secured by the deed of trust per terms in the financing addendum. The financing addendum is used for seller financing. Let's see if I can pull one up. Financing addendum.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
What about cash?
I will go over that. I have another contract that I'm going to pull up after this one. And
Okay,
I'll show you my cash. I got you covered. Let's just show you the financing addendum first, because this one's actually really complicated. Open with preview. Why can't I find it? All right, hold on. What are we called over here? Updated FA. Here we go. All right, seller financing. So seller financing is most commonly used where? Does anybody know? Jill, you should know this. It's most commonly used on something called condotels. Jill, do you know what the top condotels are here in Vegas?
I would say Martin and Sky.
Sky is one of them. So the condotels are basically something that lenders will not lend on. And they are, the most common ones are the Palms and the signature MGM towers. So these apartment or condos kind of operate like a hotel also, and they're managed by that HOA that will rent out the property for you when you are not there. So that is a condotel, and Palms and Signature are condotels that are also actually Airbnb licensed. So if any of your clients buy any in there, they're able to Airbnb it out without getting that additional license. Food for thought. But lenders will not lend on these, or it's very hard to find a lender that will, because of various reasons in the way that the ownership is actually transferred. All right, so this is the financing addendum used for seller financing. You want to put the date, the APN, which is the parcel number with the county property address. This is the seller, this is the buyer, and this is the date that it was executed. So this is a very complex document if you are not familiar with loans or seller financing. So form of documentation, you do want to consult with title and the listing agent when writing this, especially for the first time. This is just to tell escrow that the promissory note secured by a deed of trust of the same date and amount in favor of the seller should be recorded through this escrow as a first deed of trust lien upon the subject property. Escrow holder is hereby authorized to direct and use a standard note and deed of trust. So this is just saying how they're actually going to make sure that the loan is secured by the deed of trust. And it will be executed within 5 days. Terms of the promissory note, we got the principal balance, and then you have all of these check boxes on how the actual loan is going to be given to the buyer from the seller. So since the seller is the lender, they can choose how they give the money. So it can be a principal and interest, or it can be an interest only loan, or it can be a straight note loan. So if you don't know what these are, this is all about financing. So we will go over this in a different video on a different day, because we can go super deep on all of this. But this particular one, we rewrote this myself. They originally wrote it for an interest only loan, which does put a little bit towards principal, but my buyer did not like that. So we rewrote it as a principal and interest loan. He still didn't end up buying it, but we went back and forth with this. So it just lays out how the note is going to be paid. So if you guys go to I know that there's been a lot of classes about this with Sydney Cimarelli at our office, but I have mine with Tycor. So if you go to your Tycor Agent One app or your Fidelity Agent One app, you can actually do owner financing is one of the options right here. And you can actually show what this buyer would be paying. So if it were a $250,000 loan and they put 25% down, interest rate, what did this one say? This one said interest rate at 6.5. You can actually see the amortization schedule of what those payments will look like and how you will, and what will be going towards principal and what will be going towards interest throughout the life of the loan. And then when you also do seller financing, there's usually a balloon payment. So a balloon payment means that after a certain amount of time, it's usually 3 to 5 years is the standard. After a certain amount of time, then the rest of the loan will become due to the seller. So at this time, the buyer will either have to go find the loan or pay the rest of the loan off after that amount of years. And the reason the app is really good to use for this is because you will be able to tell them after year 5. So if it were a $250,000 loan, I'm looking at the amortization schedule right now. At the end of year 5, they'll owe $175,000. Okay. So then my client would have to come up with that amount at the end of that 5-year period, which is the balloon payment. So also in this financing addendum, we lay out, will there be a prepayment penalty or will there not? Are there impounds? Buyer agrees to pay impounds for taxes, insurance, and HOA. So this also happens when you have a regular loan. The lender will impound your taxes and then pay them for you at the end of the year. Remember that when you pay a mortgage, you pay one payment and it consists of 4 different things, PITI or PITI, and that's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So that T, taxes, will be impounded by your lender and paid to the government automatically. And then we come over here, we got E, we got late payments. What happens if my buyer is late on a seller financing payment? What happens if they actually default on the loan? And what is the time period that will determine this is defaulted? Default rate, your interest, once you default and then become current again, what is that rate going to be? What does that look at? Failure to pay upon maturity. So failure to pay when the loan matures, failure to pay that balloon payment, penalty for an advance payment. This is all laid out in the seller financing addendum. So there are no questions on what's going on with this loan. Due on sale or alienation clause. This means if the buyer who now owns the property and is getting finance from the seller, what do they do when they actually want to go sell it? Okay, so the entirety of the loan, the rest of the money that they owe for this to the seller will become due at that time. Acceleration clause, in the event the buyer defaults in making any of the payments when due, then in such event, the seller at their sole option require the entire balance outstanding plus accrued interest immediately due and payable. So if you're late on your loan, the seller can be like, hey, you just got to pay the rest of it off now. I'm not going to deal with any more late payments. Request for notice, seller herein requests instructions for the escrow holder to prepare and have recorded a request for notice on their behalf for each prior deed of trust, if any. Loan servicing. Loan servicers is a third-party service who actually holds the buyer responsible for making the payments and takes the payments from the buyer. So when you have a seller who's financing the deal, they go to this third-party service. In this case, it will be U.S. Loan Servicing Company, and they will take a fee. This also lays out who pays that fee. Is it the buyer or the seller, or do they split it? And stuff like that. So the U.S. Loan Servicing will also, if they default on the loan, record it on the buyer's credit and stuff like that. And then we here have waiver of loan servicing. So that means just the buyer and seller will agree to be like, hey, you just pay me directly. I trust you. It's cool. I mean, that would be nice if we could do that these days, but I do always suggest using a loan servicing company. Reconveyance upon receipt of written request from buyer reciting that all sums incurred the deed of trust have been paid upon confirmation by the trustee and surrender the deed of trust and note secured thereby the trustee for cancellation and retention. This just means the buyer actually owns it and will be reconveyed at the end of the loan. And then we just get into some general things about seller financing and general provisions of the agreement between the buyer and seller. So, and then you have them both sign here. All right, let's go back to the regular RPA, Tropical Toucan. Where am I at? Okay, here. All right, so that was letter E. Seller financing addendum. Here we have letter F, balance of purchase price. So balance of down payment. So this is what your down payment is going to be from your buyer. So in this case, it was $9,100. And then here we have the total purchase price. So when you're looking at this first page, guys, in total, we want to be able to add up all these numbers and get letter G. So when your assistants are writing this for you, or your TC, and you're confirming that it is correct, we want to add up all of these lines and get letter G. So 9,100, 455,900, and 5,000 all equal 470,000. Does anyone have any questions about this first page? All right, we will move to page 2. So number 2, new loan application. So you guys, we always make sure that people have applied for a loan. I do like to work with lenders that pre-underwrite all of my clients. That way we never run into any hiccups down the road. But if you're just doing a normal pre-approval or not a pre-qualification, you will make sure that the new loan application goes to the lender within 3 business days. So this just says buyer agrees to submit a completed loan application to the lender of buyer's choice and to furnish a pre-approval letter to the seller. These days it's super standard. You've got to send that pre-approval with the offer. So this doesn't really apply. But if buyer fails to complete any of these conditions within the applicable time frame, seller reserves the right to terminate this agreement. So if you do submit and get an offer accepted without a pre-approval for whatever reason, if your buyer does not submit this pre-approval that is completed and confirmed by the lender within 3 business days, the seller can get out of this contract and cancel it. There's not many ways that a seller can cancel a deal, okay? There's way many ways that a buyer can get out of a deal. Here's another way that a buyer can get out of a deal: the appraisal contingency. Buyer's obligation to purchase the property is contingent upon the property appraising for not less than the purchase price. So that means that the buyer is agreeing to buy the property as long as the appraisal doesn't come in low. And this is where we get our chance to renegotiate the price or back out of the deal with the appraisal contingency and get that EMD back. So say your appraisal comes in, this offer was at 470. If the appraisal came in at 465, now here's where we can invoke the appraisal contingency and get out of the deal if the seller doesn't agree to renegotiate the price, or if the buyer doesn't want to come out of pocket that additional $5,000. So we say 21 calendar days on this deal. You can make this whatever you want. Sometimes the sellers will want shorter, just like during the pandemic, and sometimes you can make it a little longer if you know that the appraisers are really busy and backed up. Sometimes they're busy and backed up on VA deals. You've got to talk to your lender and ask them, hey, Mr. Lender, how quickly can we get an appraisal done? That will also help you get your offers accepted. If you submit an offer that's 21 calendar days, your lender says, hey, I can get the appraisal done in 14. Cool, that looks way better to the seller. They might accept your offer over one that puts 21 calendar days. So if this residential purchase agreement is not canceled in writing on or before the appraisal deadline, buyer shall be deemed to have waived the appraisal contingency. This contingency is automatically waived, okay? So if you are past this 21 calendar days and that appraisal comes in low, you didn't extend the appraisal contingency because you just, bad agents won't know when the appraisal contingency is up or when their contingencies are ending. Your buyer can lose that EMD, or they will have to come up with the extra money. Now, if the appraisal comes in low, you do tell the seller. If the appraisal comes in higher, you say, hey, Mr. Seller, appraiser came in at value. We don't want to let them know that it came in above. We don't want to let them know, oh, hey, the appraisal came in at 490. Because if we have not completely negotiated repairs, or if something else happens down the road in that deal and the seller doesn't want to extend something, they can say, no, I'm sorry, I won't give an extension. So this happened to me. I don't remember the exact terms. I backed them into a corner. I think it was either on the appraisal or on the due diligence period. And then what happened at the end of the deal, the day of closing, the buyers were in Chicago. And one of the buyers was in Chicago, one of them was here, and the title company messed up and they didn't get the paperwork back in time. So it had to be overnighted, but it was the day of closing. So we needed a 1-day extension. That seller saw an out and said, I am not signing a 1-day extension. You're in default of contract. And the whole thing actually fell apart on closing day. It was tragic. But I did negotiate for my buyer to get their EMD back, but the seller did not have to get it back. But they ended up selling for a significant amount of more money to another buyer. And the listing agent was just like, oh my God, you're so good. I need to learn from you. I can't believe that, you guys backed us into so many negotiation corners, but that is a way that they can get out of the contract. So just be aware of all your contingencies. So the next one is loan contingency. This is letter C on page 2. Buyer's obligation to purchase this property is contingent on buyer obtaining the loan reference in section 1, C and D of the RPA unless otherwise agreed in writing. Your buyer shall remove the loan contingency in writing, attempt to renegotiate or cancel the RPA by providing written notice to the seller no later than, on all of our contracts, guys, we put COE. That is automatic with your assistance. This is not in favor of the seller, the COE, because that means that the buyer can get out of the contract up until close of escrow and get their EMD back. So a lot of listing agents, if they're good, they will counter this out. I like to make this either COE or 24 days. So this is a provision that is in favor of your buyer. Your buyer may not have submitted every single piece of documentation to the lender. And if they end up, now you guys should be educating your clients not to do this, but if your buyer ends up and goes and buys a car or opens a credit line to buy new furniture, or let's say there's solar on the property and they don't end up qualifying for their loan anymore because they can't make that solar payment. With written notice, they can get out of this agreement or this contract and not purchase the property anymore and get their EMD back if they don't end up qualifying for that loan with those extra things that they went and bought while they were under contract. Letter D is going to be cash purchase. So cash purchase within, this doesn't apply, so you put NA. Buyer agrees to provide written evidence with a bona fide financial institution of sufficient cash available to complete this purchase. So this is basically a pre-approval or proof of funds, we call it. So this will be submitted when you actually submit the offer. Let me show you what a cash purchase looks like. Don Fernando. All right. So this is what the first page will look like when you have a cash purchase. All of these numbers will be 0. The balance of the purchase price will be what this number, what the final purchase price is, minus the EMD. So we have the EMD, which is $3,500 on this deal. And then at the end, so balance of purchase price, which we're all paying cash, will be just the rest of the funds will be transferred from my buyer to the escrow company, which will go to the seller. So again, all of these numbers should add up to line G. So this is what a cash purchase should look like. And this one, when did we close? We closed on this one last month too. So that's a brand new one. All right, back to Tropical Toucan. So next line is an interesting one, and you will be seeing more of this in the future also because the market has slowed down a little bit. We are now in a normal market. So this one has to do with the sale of one property while you're purchasing another. This is called a contingent offer. So when you make a contingent offer, your buyer has to sell their house in order to purchase the next one. So as a listing agent, when you see this box checked, you want to know how far in the sale is the buyer. Has the buyer already found a buyer for their property that they're selling? So there's a lot of dominoes that can fall a lot of different ways, guys, in this. So if the buyer's home falls out of contract with the one they're trying to sell, then they can't purchase this next home. And that's what it means. My offer to you, Mr. Seller, is contingent on me being able to sell my home. So when I do have a buyer that is making contingent offers, I want to make sure that they're past that due diligence stage. So that is the time when most homes will fall out of contract. I would say about 70% of homes fall out of contract during the due diligence period, just because of different things that happen during the inspection and stuff like that. So if you have a contingent offer, just go ahead and check this right here. Colette, did you have a question? You just unmuted.
No, I'm sorry. That was an accident.
All right. All right, fixtures and personal property. Fixtures are things like a fan, things like a chandelier, let's say window coverings that are fixed to the wall. All the following items will be transferred free of liens with the sale of property and with no real value unless stated otherwise herein. So all existing fixtures, including but not limited to electrical, mechanical, lighting, plumbing, heating fixtures, ceiling fans, fireplaces, gas logs, solar power systems, built-in appliances, window, door screens, awnings, shuttered window coverings, attached floor coverings, television, antennas, satellite dishes. All right, so basically everything that's fixed to the property is considered a fixture. If you're walking through a home and you see something like Colette, remember I was pointing out all the cool like chandeliers and stuff at that one listing appointment we went to. And I asked her, are you planning on taking these with you? The reason for that was because if she's planning on taking those stuff with her, you kind of want to list it within the listing so that people know when they're walking through, hey, this is not staying with the property. Now, if your buyers see something and they want it to stay and it's very important for them to stay, you want to list it here, and you'll list it here in this blank space, just like you would if there were additional terms. Or anything here, you can also list like, hey, my buyer wants all of the furniture. My buyer really wants that couch, that headboard. They want the patio furniture. So you can list it right here and include anything with the sale. So any personal property will go right there. All right, moving right along to page 3. What's that?
Question. I'm sorry. What if it was a model staged home and the buyer wants all of the furniture?
You would just list all furniture to be included, all furnishings.
Okay, and then I did have a question about contingency.
Okay.
I have a potential client in California who has her home on the market and she wants a contingency for that home to sell in order for her to purchase a home here in Vegas. So can you give me some tips on dealing with that? And then looking at her home online, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, there's no other better words to describe the condition of the home from what I can see from the MLS, the photos that she had taken and posted for the listing is horrible. I mean, and it's been on
You mean the listing agent took horrible photos?
Whoever took her photos asked, I stressed to her that she talked to me. She's been to Vegas, here to visit, and I've given her a tour here once in recent weeks. And so the house is a total mess. It's the best thing about the property is the size of the lot, which is really large, and the backyard is nice, but inside the home is totally junk. And I stressed to her that she needed to, stage the home, and she only wants it to be shown once a week on Sundays only by appointment. And to me, that's like saying you don't really want to sell the house.
That is definitely a difficult situation. So first things first, since she is where, how do you know how she found her listing agent over there?
It's a friend. It's someone that she said, I don't know if a church member or it's someone that she knows or somehow associated.
So what I would do is find her motivation. What is her reason for moving out here? And continuously remind her of her motivation. And then at the same time, I would also get her under contract as your buyer. I would definitely get a BBA right away, because if that listing agent is a good listing agent, they will be trying to find somebody to refer her to so that they can make that referral fee. Okay.
Okay.
Second of all, I would start slipping in some things like, hey, just to let you know, maybe you want to tell your friend who's listed your house to get professional photos done. Do you know the importance of the marketing that goes out with your listing, the importance of it to get sold? You know, homes get sold 60% faster when they have the proper marketing. And remind her of her motivation. Say, hey, if you want to get here by next Tuesday and you want to get that home sold, you're going to have to properly market your home. Can you ask your listing agent to take professional photos, or get professional photos done for you and stuff like that? Say it won't cost you anything. You know, the agent will pay for it, but can you ask them to do that to get your home sold so you can get here to be closer to your grandbabies sooner, or whatever her reason is. And then also I would have a referral agent in California in her area on the line, on tap, just so that when she does realize that her listing agent isn't as good as, you know, she needs them to be to get to her goals, that she will be able to pivot and get a good listing agent. You'll make the referral agreement. You'll make the referral payment, and then you can keep her under your wing also. Does that make sense?
Well, pretty much, mostly. I'll have to figure out a way to share these pictures with you. It's not so much the quality of the photos, is, I'm an artist and pictures don't lie. It's this the content of her home. It's not, you can see the photos are clear. It's just, I'll have to figure out a way and get with
Are
you.
they cell phone photos?
I'm sorry,
Are
cell
they
phone?
cell phone photos?
That I don't know. I didn't look for.
All right, if you send them to me, I'll be able to tell. But you can also tell her, hey, you know, you can show her some maybe examples of listings that people cleaned up versus people who didn't clean up.
Well, she's
Um,
seen that. She saw that when she came here on my tour. And I don't want to take up a lot of time here in this platform with you. I'll get with you, for the sake of your
okay.
meeting time.
Yeah, we can talk one-on-one and see how we can help her realize. How many days on market has she been with her home in LA?
It's only been about 3 weeks, I think.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens, and then you and I will get together to see how we can
Yeah.
make it happen sooner for her.
With no offers at all. I mean, but that's only maybe 3 showings if she's only doing it on a Sunday. And, Mother's Day is coming up. So that knocks that day out. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm running into some weird clients. It's just kind of like, do you really have a brain? But I'll end it here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll talk one-on-one and make sure we get her in line for her goals. All right. So then what was I on? Page 3. So here's where we get into escrow. Opening of escrow shall be held at Ty Court Title with Kelly Lobeck on this deal. All right, this just lays out where the escrow is going to be, who's going to be holding the EMD and doing all of the title work. Earnest money upon acceptance, buyer EMD as shown if applicable of this agreement shall be deposited pursuant to the language in section 1A and B. And then we list close of escrow. Close of escrow shall be on or before this date. So on or before. Now, there's a lot of times when the lenders will not require a additional addendum to change the close of escrow date. Personally, I always like to write the addendum anyways, just because it keeps everybody on the same page, especially if it is not a title company that you have a relationship with. I have had multiple title companies that just can't get their act together and get that honor before like that date. If the lender says, you know, this one was closing 4/4, if the and my lender actually was able to close like 4/22 or something. All right. The title company, I tried writing emails, I tried getting everybody on the same page. They actually countered this title company to use the Open Door title company, and they are not that great. And when I say not that great, I'm being very nice. They're horrible. They could not get their act together. We had to continuously delay, continuously have the lender rewrite documents. I was like, finally, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm writing another addendum. Get everybody on the same page. We're closing early. So honor before should be good enough, but it doesn't always make sure that everybody's on the same page. So like I said, write an addendum anyways. IRS disclosure. Seller is hereby made aware that there is a regulation that requires all escrow holders to complete a modified 1099 form based on specific information known only between parties in this transaction and the escrow holder. Seller is also made aware that escrow holder is required by a federal law to provide this information to the IRS after close of escrow in the manner prescribed by federal law. Meaning the tax man wants to know how much money you're making on your house and will require you to fill out a 1099 form and pay taxes on that income. All right, title insurance. This purchase agreement is contingent upon the seller's ability to deliver good and marketable title, which means free and clear, all right, that they can provide, they can make sure that all liens and everything have been taken away. And the title insurance will protect the new buyer against any liens that weren't recorded or any liens that, you know, may pop up in the future or were missed. That will be the title insurance. We'll be paying those off. Buyer's due diligence. This is your due diligence period, guys. This is your inspection period. All right. Buyer's obligation is conditioned on the buyer's due diligence as defined in section 7A below. Now, when you do cancel a contract, the most common one that will be put on there and reason why EMD should be returned will be noted as section 7A. The condition is referred to as the due diligence condition. If checked in the affirmative, sections A through C shall apply. So if this is checked, that means that the next sections A through C will apply. Buyer shall have 10 calendar days following the date of acceptance of the RPA to complete the buyer's due diligence. Seller agrees to cooperate with the buyer's due diligence. This means that the seller needs to have all of the utilities on, guys. All right. Seller shall ensure that all necessary utilities are and all operable pilot lights are on for buyer's investigations through close of escrow. When you have a inspector go through that property, the inspector will not turn on the gas, power, water, and will not turn on pilot lights in order to make sure that the things are working. They also will not plug in appliances again. Okay. So if a dishwasher or something is unplugged, the inspector is going to be like, hey, I don't know if there's something wrong with this dishwasher. I don't know if it's going to explode, catch fire, spew water everywhere. They do not plug those things in, guys. The seller has to do that. And when this happens, the inspector will have to return to the property when the gas gets turned back on or when the utilities go back on. And per the contract, the seller has to do these things. So if you have a listing, you want to tell your seller, hey, Mr. Seller, you have to keep on the utilities through close of escrow. Property inspection and condition. During the due diligence. Yep.
Could I interrupt? I'm sorry. But this happened to me and it freaked me out. It was the day before the walkthrough on my listing for a home. And so the inspector came out on that Friday or Saturday. It was one of those days that he did it and turned the water off. And the water had been on the whole time. This house was listed for a couple of months or so or whatever. And I go over to make sure before the final walkthrough on that Monday on a Sunday and discovered the water was turned off. And I freaked out. I had no clue that this guy had turned the water off. It had been on the whole time. And I had the practice of like flushing the toilet every time I would go over to check the home. And I freaked out. I ended up looking at the inspection report and having to call him. He was on the ocean in California, about to be away from the shore where he couldn't even get internet, phone reception. And thankfully, he answered my call. And he told me I had to go out in the yard, the front yard, where the water control for the drip system in the ground is. That's where he had turned it off. And then I had to FaceTime, and I was like, oh my God. I
Oh
ended
my
up, I think,
goodness.
sending him like a certificate of Starbucks certificate or something, after, just for thanking him for taking my call, first of all, and then walking me through. But why did he turn it off?
So the inspector turned it off, or did the
The
seller turn it off?
inspector turned it off. No,
Uh,
I was a listing agent, or this was my listing. I was
So the
the seller,
inspector will,
or the buyer's inspector.
if it's just the main line and it's off, the inspector may turn it on to inspect the property, but then they turn it back off before they leave. But that's
That's,
very, very weird that they didn't leave it in the same condition that they inspected it in.
yes, it's typically that shut off is in the garage, right? I mean, I went
Yeah.
through all kind of hoops that day. It was very nerve-wracking.
And you guys, we will be doing that as listing agents and buyers agents. Sometimes we just, that's part of our job. We got to make sure to make things happen for our buyers and sellers. All right. So during the due diligence period, buyer shall take such action as buyer deems necessary to determine whether the property is satisfactory to the buyer, including but not limited to whether the property is insurable to the buyer's satisfaction, whether there are unsatisfactory conditions surrounding otherwise affecting the property, location of flood zones and everything. So guys, basically what this whole thing is saying is the buyer has this 10 days to make sure that everything is just what they want. They can back out because, oh, it's not in the school district that I thought it was. There's different specific things about, it's not just about the inspection. All right, this is about everything under the sun. They can wake up and sneeze the wrong way and be like, oh wait, I don't want to live over there. It's too close to a railroad, or it's not, there's casino zoning just 3 blocks away. Stuff like that, they can back out for any reason. And this is what 7A says. So when you're canceling a deal and you get your buyer's EMD back, you usually are going to put per section A, we can get the EMD back. All right, the next one is, it says if buyer cancels this agreement due to a specific inspection report, buyer shall provide the seller at the time of cancellation with a copy of the report containing the names, addresses, and telephone number of the inspector. So this is why I usually like to say the less information you give the listing agent, the better. When you are canceling a deal, just say, they just decided against it. Otherwise, they might ask for a bunch of things. Don't lie to the listing agent and say they're backing out and due to the inspection, because per this RPA, you will be required to provide a copy of that and reasons why they want to back out. All right. So B, buyer's right to cancel or resolve objections. If buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the results of the due diligence are unacceptable, buyer may either no later than the due diligence deadline referenced in section 7, cancel the residential purchase agreement by providing written notice to the seller. The written notice is the actual cancellation document, whereupon the earnest money deposit shall be released to the buyer without the requirement of further written authorization for the seller. So this means that my buyer can send a cancellation and the title company doesn't need extra confirmation from the seller in order to get their EMD back. All right. Failure to cancel or resolve objections. If buyer fails to cancel within the due diligence period, so within those 10 days, then the buyer has been deemed to waive the due diligence conditions. So if it's day 11 and they haven't sent a cancellation, but then they end up wanting to cancel on day 11 and their due diligence period is day 10, that seller does not have to give that EMD back. Okay. All right, inspections. Acceptance of this offer is subject to the following reserved rights. So my offer is subject to the following inspections coming back the way that I want them as a buyer. Buyer may have the property inspected and selected the licensed contractors, certified building inspectors, and or other qualified professionals who will inspect the property. Seller will ensure that the necessary utilities, again, here this is reiterated, are turned on and supplied to the property within 2 business days after acceptance of this agreement and remain on until close of escrow. It is strongly recommended that the buyer retain licensed Nevada professionals to conduct inspections. We don't want your friends, father inspecting it and say that they're a home inspector if they don't have their home inspection license. All right. If any inspection is not completed and requested repairs are not delivered to the seller within the due diligence period, buyer is deemed to have waived. So what this means is if the buyer does not submit that request for repairs within that 10 days, they are definitely forfeiting their right to cancel per these inspections or ask for any repairs. So here we just have, I waive all of these guys unless you have a VA offer, then this termite inspection is the responsibility of the seller, but it did change this year. VA buyers can now pay for their own termite inspection, but guys, it's only $90 or under $100. So it's not that much. And then you can put paid by buyer, paid by seller, or whoever you want it to be paid for by in these boxes here. Certification: in the event that inspection reveals areas of concern with the roof, septic system, well, wood burning device, chimney, or the possible presence of fungal contaminant, buyer reserves the right to require a certification. So the expenses for certifications will be paid outside of escrow and prior to close of escrow. A certification is not a warranty. So this just means you get extra certifications and inspections done, and they're paid for outside of escrow, so before close of escrow. Buyer's request for repairs: it is a buyer's responsibility to inspect the property sufficiently as to satisfy the buyer's use. Buyer reserves the right to request repairs based on the seller's SRPDs or items which may materially affect value or use of property revealed by an inspection, certification, or appraisal. Items of general maintenance or cosmetic nature which do not materially affect the value or use of property which existed at the time of acceptance, which are not expressly addressed in this agreement, are deemed acceptable to the buyer. So what does this mean, guys? This means conditions of the carpet, if they weren't put in here. So you can actually put in this RPA, hey, in order to buy this property, I want you to get the carpets cleaned professionally. That can be put in the RPA. But if the seller accepts the RPA and then you go request the carpet cleaning in the request for repairs, the seller doesn't have to do that. Okay, that it's mostly what they're saying here is cosmetic repairs do not affect the value of the property or its inhabitability, and the seller doesn't have to fix those. And they're saying as the buyer, you're kind of just accepting it, and it's deemed acceptable by the buyer because you already submitted an RPA. All right, so the listing agents might come back to you with that rebuttal and say, well, per the RPA 7F, you saw that the carpets were dirty and you saw these cosmetic issues, so we're not going to go ahead and repair those. Then we get into the fees and who pays the fees. So buyer, seller, 50-50 split or waived. Escrow fees, lender title, policy fees. So these right here that I have put are just the standard. This is, the RPTT is usually paid by the seller. Appraisals usually paid by the buyer, but you can put whatever you want here, guys. And sometimes the listing agents won't look at it. Prorations: any and all taxes, interest, homeowners association fees, tax service fees, that trash service fees, payments on bonds, SIDs and lids, and assessments assumed by the buyer and other expenses of the property shall be prorated. Prorated means, so if we're closing on a deal halfway through the month and the trash service fees are $35 a month, the seller will pay the first 15 days of the trash service fees, and the buyer will pay once they get in there and for close of escrow. And these will usually be paid through close of escrow. The title company will prorate all of these things for you, SIDs, lids, assessments, stuff like that. Preliminary title report. Within 10 business days of opening escrow, the title company shall provide the buyer with a preliminary title report to review, and which must be approved or rejected within 5 business days of receipt. So you can back out based on the preliminary title report within 5 days. Another thing that you can back out on with your buyer is the SRPDs. So if your SRPDs come back and they say, oh, the roof caved in 3 years ago, and your buyer is like, I don't want to be living in a house where the roof has previously caved in, you can back out based on what you find on those SRPDs. All right, moving along to page 5. This is where it gets fun. Closing fees. And this is where you'll get a lot of things that you're going to have to go back and forth with your counter offers on. Closing fees are also called seller concessions. Okay. Closing fees. In addition to the seller's expenses identified herein, seller will contribute $12,000 to buyer's lender's fees, including costs which seller must pay pursuant to the loan program requirements, title and escrow fees, and or buyer's recurring or non-recurring closing fees that may include brokerage commissions not covered as part of cooperation offered but not limited to. What does this mean, guys? This means that you can get closing costs from the seller. If the seller isn't willing to change that co-op for you, you can get closing fees, seller concessions, and actually have the lender move them over to the other side on the balance sheet and have them covered as commissions, so that you get, those closing costs and fees covered by the seller. So you can tell your buyers, hey, I did get those closing costs and seller concessions from the seller. So the seller is still paying my closing fees, even though it looks like it's on your side, the seller is still paying. That is a good thing to note. So definitely make sure to go over that with your buyers. Different loan types have different appraisal and financing requirements, which affect the parties' rights and costs under this agreement. So you definitely always want to check this including, because that means if this $12,000 is more than all of the costs, all of the lender's fees, then you can apply it to other things. Home protection plan. This is going to be your home warranty. Buyer and seller acknowledge that they have been made aware of the home protection plans that provide coverage to the buyer. Buyer requires or waives a home protection plan. So with cash offers, they usually waive it and they just get one later. With all loans, I do try to get the seller to pay for it. A lot of home warranties before the pandemic have been anywhere from $300 to $600. You guys, these days they're a lot more expensive. So you will get a lot of counter offers back and forth. You also check the seller or buyer who's paying for the home warranty. Neither seller nor brokers make any representation as to the extent of coverage. So we have 2 home warranty companies that we work a lot with. They're Dwellness and Fidelity. I like to tell my buyers, hey, all home warranty companies suck. So here are the 2 best of the worst. I have found that Dwellness and Fidelity are better than a lot of the other ones. One of the worst ones I can note is American Home Shield, by the way, just to let you know. All right, transfer of title. Upon close of escrow, buyer shall tender to the seller the agreed upon purchase price. So buyer will give the money, all of the money that they agreed to. So in this case, it would be $470,000. I agree to give you all of that money at close of escrow. And the seller shall tender the buyer, and in return for that $470,000, the buyer shall return marketable title to the property, free of all encumbrances other than the real property, current taxes, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So HOA, zoning, and master plans restrictions. So basically they're saying they're giving the buyer marketable title. They can do with this property whatever they want, subject to the current property taxes, current easements, any zoning and stuff like that. They can do anything that they want with the property because they own it free and clear. Common interest communities. This is CIC and HOA. If the property is subject to a common interest community, the seller shall provide at the seller's expense the CIC documents. These are kind of expensive, guys, and you want to make sure your sellers know this. It's going to cost them probably, a little bit under $200 for each the HOA demand and the HOA docs and the resale package. So the resale package shall request the resale package within 2 business days of acceptance. These packages, these documents do take a while to get. I like to say that it's a little bit of a scam as far as how these documents are furnished to the buyers. The seller has to pay, it's like $165 or $195 for each of these 2 packages. So the demand and the resale package and the HOA docs. So they do take anywhere from 10 to 15 days to get. So you want to make sure that that seller or that title company has ordered them within 2 business days of getting this under contract. So pursuant to NRS, the buyer may cancel this agreement without penalty until midnight of the 5th calendar day following the date of receipt of the resale package. So once your clients get those HOA docs, they have 5 days to review it. And if they don't like the HOA rules, like I just got one for Centennial, and we found that the HOA, even though it's houses, they don't like you to have any pets that are over 25 pounds. So my buyers were like, well, we want to get a golden retriever. And so we dove deeper into that, and they ended up deciding to move forward with it anyways. The HOA said that they do not enforce it. So they're just kind of crossing their fingers and hoping that they don't get any fines. I imagine that is more for like breed restrictions, but they didn't really want to put it as breed restrictions, or if anybody's pet really becomes a nuisance. But right in their HOA docs, they do say, we don't really enforce this, but we do have this rule anyways. It was really weird, but we had to get through that. So if my buyers did decide to cancel, they have 5 days to actually be able to back out and get their EMD back. So if buyer does not receive the resale package within 15 business days, this agreement may be canceled without penalty. So here's another way your buyer can get out of the contract. If the seller has not ordered it yet, and we're getting down to the end of the wire, and the deal has been really shaky, and your buyer's like, and your buyer wants out, but you're past all your contingencies, you can be like, oh my God, we haven't received the HOA documents yet. I can get you out of this contract and get your EMD back. No problem. There's a loophole for you. All right, upon such written cancellation, buyers shall promptly receive your EMD back. All right. CIC related fees. This one was not in an HOA, so we just put NA for all of these. Disclosures. So here are different disclosures within 5 calendar days of this acceptance of this agreement. The seller will provide the following disclosures and documents. Check all applicable boxes. So if a home was constructed before 1978, you do want to get this lead-based paint disclosure. All right. If there's a smart home, if there's smart home equipment in there, if they have a Ring doorbell, anything, and a Nest thermostat, you definitely want to have this checked, and you always want to have this checked for seller real property disclosure forms. Construction claims defect. Yes, if seller is marked yes to paragraph 1D of the seller of the SRPDs, you want to have this construction defect claims disclosure in there. Federal fair housing compliance. This is just all properties are offered without regard to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, gender identity, or expression, familial status, sexual disorientation, orientation, ancestry, or handicapped, or any other current requirements of fair housing laws. This is just saying the seller is not going to discriminate. And we also, just something to note, are not allowed to send what we call love letters. So your buyer cannot send a letter explaining who their family is in order to try to win a deal. Walkthrough inspection of the property. Buyer is entitled under this agreement to a walkthrough of the property within 3 calendar days of close of escrow prior to ensure the property and all major systems, appliances, heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical systems, and mechanical fixtures as stated in the SRPDs, and that property and improvements are the same in general condition as when this agreement was accepted by seller and buyer. To facilitate the buyer's walkthrough, the seller is responsible for keeping all necessary utilities on, including all operable pilot lights. All right, so guys, seller has to keep utilities on for the walkthrough. We want to go through and make sure that when they move, they don't like they don't bang up all the walls and stuff like that. Or if there's no broken windows, guys, always check all the windows. I can tell you've had a couple broken windows that were missed, and I ended up paying for them because I just didn't do my diligence when we were walking through. So that was mistakes that I made in the beginning of my career, and I paid for them. All right. If buyer elects not to conduct a walkthrough prior to close of escrow, then all systems, items, and aspects of property are deemed satisfactory. So this just basically waives it and says, hey, I'm not going to come back to you after close of escrow and say, hey, you didn't do X, Y, and Z, and then try to sue you for certain things. Delivery of possession. Seller shall deliver the property along with keys, alarm codes, door, garage codes is freely transferable, parking permits, and gate responders outside close of escrow upon outside of escrow upon COE. Seller usually leaves all of the gate codes, keys, remotes, and all stuff like that in the kitchen drawer. So that I usually always check a COE unless there's a different date that the seller is going to be transferring the property to the buyer. So this would be like in the event of a post-possession addendum, which we will go over probably in the next meeting. All right, guys, well, it is 10:39. This has been a long meeting. I am going to stop it here because we're only halfway through, and I will go over the back half of the RPA in the next meeting. I will also be going over some new things that I'm going to be bringing to the program, some new things just to get you guys up and running and making sure that you guys make 2023 a very good year. So do you guys have any questions about the first half of this RPA? Anything you learned new, anything else you want to go over before we close this out?
I do.
All right, let's hear it.
If you go to page 7.
Okay, oh, let me put it back up.
So what if my buyer views the home and notices that the carpet needs replacing? So in the original RPA, do you submit the addendum for any requests that the buyer may have pertaining to that?
Okay, so if you're walking through a property, and what I do when I do my showings and when I actually get that buyer to say, hey, I do want to make an offer, I say, are there any items of personal property that you saw that you want to include in your offer? Or are there any items that you see you wanted fixed that you want to actually include with your offer?
Okay.
So I would put that in the additional terms. I would put in the additional terms, seller to get carpet professionally cleaned before close of escrow. That stuff needs to be put in the original offer. Otherwise, you're left trying to negotiate it at when you're doing the repairs request, and people don't often agree to cosmetic repairs, or myself as a listing agent don't often agree to cosmetic repairs when we are doing the request for repairs. That stuff needs to be put in the RPA, and that's because of those provisions that we read when we were going over the due diligence period.
Okay, because I viewed a home that was listed with a credit for a carpet replacement of like $3,000 or $5,000 or something, but it was in the listing information. And my other question is, do we have termites in Vegas?
So back to the first one, if it's listed in the agent to agent remarks.
Yes, it was.
If that's listed there, you definitely want to reiterate it in the RPA. You want to make sure to put it in the additional terms, seller crediting X amount of dollars for carpet replacement.
Even though they said it.
Even though they said it, you always want to have it written out.
Okay. All right.
Number 2, yes, we do have termites in Vegas, I think, but I've never seen them.
So termite inspections are recommended on.
Termite inspections are required on VA loans.
Only VA.
Only VA.
So otherwise, if my buyer wanted an inspection for that, he would have to include it in that inspection order, for the home, correct?
Yes, if you have a buyer that is not VA, but does want to have a termite inspection done, you would just put in those boxes on that page that buyer is going to pay for a termite inspection also.
Or negotiate it with the seller to pay for it.
For that, yeah. But if it's not a VA loan, they're unlikely to pay for any of the buyer's due diligence inspection.
Got it.
But you
Okay.
can try. There's no harm in trying. I do like to submit really strong offers in favor of my buyers just to see where the seller's at, especially if there's no other offers. There's no harm in that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Huh? Any other questions, you guys? All right, good meeting. I'm going to post this on YouTube and I will see you guys next week. I'm going to be putting in the chat. We are going to start doing our meetings on Thursdays so that I can get you guys all rocking and rolling for the weekends as these summer months come around. All right, so I'll put all that info in the chat and I'll see you guys soon. Make sure to be reaching out to me daily if you have any questions. Bye, guys.